everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The Good Guy Drinks Whiskey. I'm Tim, and today I have a fun theme. I'm inviting DaMon Brown on, who is from VA Bourbon Hunters, and I'm going to introduce him to some Scotch whiskey. He's mostly a bourbon drinker, hasn't really delved into Scotch much, so I was going to see if I can kind of break down that bourbon wall and get him to like some Scotch whiskeys. So with that, let me invite him on to the chat. Hey, DaMon, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. About you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your night and joining me here as I try to break down that bourbon wall a little bit and introduce some of these Scotch whiskeys to you.
Yeah, man. I love a good challenge.
Yeah, and that was my goal. So just for a little background for everybody who's watching, you and I have chatted a little bit in our DMs over the last couple of years, and I remember about a year and a half ago, one of your buddies sent you a set of Scotch whiskeys to try, but they were all lower ABV, really beginner whiskeys, and you didn't like them that much. So I wanted to challenge your notion of what a Scotch whiskey can be. So I sent you 5 samples. They're all going to be cask strength, and I'm hoping at least a couple of these may appeal to you. One of them is an Irish whiskey, so they're not all Scotch whiskey, but 4 Scotch whiskeys, 1 Irish whiskey. So, as I was saying, hopefully we can find at least one pour tonight, or hopefully more than one that you actually enjoy. But before we jump into the whiskeys, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started kind of on your whiskey journey and your channel and all that stuff?
Yeah, man. I am. It's not a super exciting story. Kind of almost like the same everyone else. Like I was already a little bit into bourbon whiskey. Nothing too crazy. I just had maybe 5 to 7 bottles at home that I would always keep. Things that were top shelf, or what I thought was considered like, not rare whiskey, but like, good whiskey. And at some point about three years ago, I had always heard about Blandings, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know. A friend was, oh, this Blandings is at a local liquor store, and I was like, all right, well, let me go get it. So I grabbed it. It was $60. It was retail, and my friend, I'll call him. His name is Bougie Ben. He's got the Rolexes. He has these rich ass friends and everything. And so after like a month or so, I opened it up because he told me, he was like, this is the bourbon of the gods. This is the best bourbon you can get. All this stuff. And I opened it up and I was like, man, this is just like mediocre. Like this isn't anything like crazy. It wasn't bad, but it was just like, oh, this is okay. And so I texted him and I was like, hey man, like I opened this up and this isn't even like this. I mean, this is a good bottle, but I don't think it's like worth the hype. And he's like, you're crazy, man. This is like liquid gold, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole of just trying to figure out, because I searched online. I saw, those crazy online bourbon prices, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, people are paying $200 for this bottle. Like, this is something that's like rare. And then I said to myself, like, I wonder what else is out there that people consider rare that just isn't that good.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I came across a couple of bourbon pages on my regular Instagram, and I started kind of posting more about bourbon on my regular Instagram, on my stories and everything like that. And once I realized there was like a bourbon community on Instagram, and eventually I was like, you know what, like, why am I flooding like my regular friends with like a bunch of bourbon? Most of these people don't care about this. So I was like, let me just make a bourbon page, I'll make a bourbon page, and like, if people want to follow me for the stuff that I post, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool. Also, this is kind of for fun. And it just kind of spiraled from there. And now I try to post all the time, and sometimes it's tiring, but it's fun. It's fun, a little Instagram life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a fun hobby to have, and it's good to just connect with people and meet people all around the world, really. I mean, I don't know how widespread bourbon is. Obviously, that's more U.S.-centric, but at least for Scotch and other whiskeys, you kind of connect to people in the U.K. and all around the world. And it's one of the coolest things about having these Instagram accounts.
Yeah, you Scotch whiskey guys, y'all are crazy. Like, I mean, like when it comes to like the community, like even something as simple as followers, like someone who's like posting about like whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Scotch, they always have more followers. It's like you said, it's worldwide. Like it's all over the place. And you have the small bourbon community. It's like, oh my god, you got 3,000 followers, bro.
Yeah, yeah, no, that the bourbon is definitely more United States centric, but clearly over the last several years, bourbon has just exploded in popularity in the United States, and it's definitely the go-to spirit among most whiskey drinkers in the U.S. But when I do post about bourbon, it definitely gets a lot less traction than when I post about Scotch. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's your like go-to bourbon? What's your favorite out there?
Well, favorite and go to would be two completely different ones.
All right, we'll have the two answers then.
My favorite is the King Kentucky. That's like my favorite pour that I have. My go-to, it's kind of a hard question for me. I always say that because like I don't have any, like I have so many bottles that like it's kind of how I'm feeling. But E.H. Taylor, anyone who knows me knows that I'm an E.H. Taylor fanboy. So even E.H. Taylor small batch, like it's just such. Shut up, Ricky. It's not Basil Hayden. E.H. Taylor small batch is always like a really good go-to for me. So super simple. It's a nice bottle and bond, and I don't feel completely like crazy about drinking a whole bottle during the weekend or something like that.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And the one thing about bourbon for me is that I think there is a little less differentiation from one bourbon to the next than there is in a Scotch whiskey. And when you really want to explore some of those more interesting bourbons, it's just not really accessible because of the price range. As you get to those allocated bourbons, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of dollars for fairly entry level expression. So that's the tough entry point into bourbons for me.
Yeah, I was going to mention that on the live when you posted to clear out the name be a Scotch hunter. And I was thinking like I guess like I'm and I don't know the Scotch world at all, right?
Yeah.
So, but it seems like for the most part, is there even really like Scotch hunting?
There is, but more so in the UK than in the United States. So, for example, right now in the UK, there's a similar craze or mania going on with the Springbank distillery. I don't know if you know who that is or what that is, but Springbank is like the sought after Scotch whiskey right now. So the second they get released online, they're sold out in seconds. And then nowadays, most liquor stores don't even post them online. You have to go into the shop in the UK to buy them. So it makes it a little bit more challenging for us in the US to get a lot of those bottles. But that would probably be the closest thing. And then there are some Macallan expressions out there that people really seek out and go after just because that has the more prestigious name and kind of the collector's item more so than drinking. But it's not to the same level as allocated bourbon. Like there's no real Pappy of the Scotch world or some of those other stags or some of the stuff that's just really challenging to get in the United States. And just in general, what's your background in Scotch whiskey? I know you've got that sample set sent to you, but aside from that, have you dabbled at all? Have you bought anything?
No.
All right.
No, I mean, of course, like when I was younger, you get like the Johnny Walkers. I've had some Macallans, but I wouldn't. I haven't had enough for me to even say like, oh, like I don't like this type of Scotch. I like this type. It's just for the most part, it's all just been kind of like, it's just like really good noses and the flavor just isn't there for me in general. I have had a Habiki that I enjoyed. That was in that little packet that Eric sent me. I've had, of course, like Johnny Walker, Blue Label, Black Label, and I know you real Scotch lovers, or y'all like screw Johnny Walker. And I have had this, which one? This Redbreast 12. A friend, Erin, Brazen Whiskey, she sent this to me a couple months ago.
Okay.
So I do know that I do enjoy this.
Now, did you have the cask strength version or the standard version? Was it very mellow and
not very spicy?
No, it was cask strength because she also purposely sent me like cask strength stuff. So.
Okay, all right, good. So at least we're on the right page here with that cask strength.
Redbreast.
And I had another Irish whiskey that a friend sent me. It's Terramonic or I don't know, but that was actually really, really that was. Like he gave it to me. He was like, I know you don't like Scotch or Irish whiskey, but this is like the closest thing to like bourbon that I have, and you should enjoy. And it was delicious.
Yeah, actually, I've noticed there's actually a more similar flavor profile to an Irish whiskey and a bourbon. They kind of match each other a little bit better than Scotch whiskey. So that's not too surprising that you ended up kind of liking both of those Irish whiskeys. Yeah, and just one more note on bourbon. I mean, especially you're in an ABC state, so that adds to some of the challenge because on one side it's cheaper in Virginia when it hits the stores, but then you're battling. And I know they just started that Instagram will tell you where they're going to release stuff. And actually, I was just in Richmond last weekend, and the Midlothian branch, they said, "Oh, we got some new stuff." They didn't tell you what it was on Instagram. I went out there, and it was all kind of average stuff that you can get at any liquor store up in the Northeast. But that's got to be a little bit of a challenge for you.
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, it's at the point where I don't even waste my time for the most part. I mean, it's you got to be there within 5 minutes of the email dropping, or you get nothing. I mean, I have a ABC store right across the street from me. I got there 7 minutes after the email dropped, and there were 15 people in front of me. I got a knob 12, and then I returned it because the knob free 12s are $75 now. And I was like, I don't even want this. I bought it because it was the only thing that was available.
Yeah.
I returned it. It's definitely hindering. But I mean, it's kind of doing its job. You know, it's supposed to help people like the regular working guy, like be able to have a better chance of getting stuff. And so I can only be but so upset because they're trying to do the right thing. Their right thing just doesn't correlate to what I want them to do in my life. But I mean, you have like a lot of regular. I mean, like for instance, I went to a store. Actually, got lucky. I got an Old Fit 17 a couple of weeks ago, and there were Old Fits coming. Threes, right? Mm-hmm. So there were 1, 2, 3 people in front. No, 4 people in front of me, including Ricky, who is of course my bourbon friend. But the guy in front of that was in front of the line was him and his girlfriend. Yeah, they got 2 Eagle Rares, and then the guy in front of Ricky got just a handle of vodka. But the guy that got the Eagle Rare, he was so happy, right? He was like, "Oh my God, finally!" Like he didn't even know he had no idea there was a Fitz 17 right there that like people like go crazy over. So it's like, yeah, like it's cool to see that there are people that don't even care or know about these like super high class like bourbons. They're able to get these like $30 treats like Eagle Rare stuff.
Yeah, and then that one is ubiquitous up in the Northeast. I see Eagle Rare on every shelf of the liquor stores I go to, and I didn't even know it was something that people sought after. I actually had a post like a year and a half ago cooking with Eagle Rare bourbon chicken, and people were like, "Oh my God, how could you use that cooking?" I'm like, I don't know, it's a cheap bourbon.
People on Instagram, man, they go crazy. I posted a video one time of me chugging that E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, and people lost their minds. Oh my God, you need to sip that. What are you doing? I'm like, it's mine. I do what I want.
Exactly. Enjoy your whiskey however you want to enjoy it. That's stuff. And I do have some bourbons on my shelf. I mean, my go-to is Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and anytime I see that on the shelf, usually for around under $70, I'll buy a bottle just to keep it on there. It's something that I usually use as my dessert dram after something nice and peaty from Scotland. All right, so let's jump into the whiskey now. So the first one we're going to pour is going to be the Oban 12, and I'm a little hesitant picking this one first because somebody once told me that, it's Chris from Single Malt Savvy, I don't know if you know him, he's a fellow Instagrammer. He said if you want to get a bourbon drinker into Scotch, give them something super sherried at first, because that's more similar of a bold profile to a bourbon. This one is not a sherried one, this one is ex-bourbon. It is cask strength. And before you take nose and smell it, the important thing to consider is that malted barley and the way Scotch is matured it's basically like 2 different drinks, right? It's not really, they're both whiskeys, obviously, but they should just be like mentally separate yourself from trying to compare it to a bourbon, because really it's not. It's just, it doesn't taste anything like it's about the same as comparing a bourbon to a rum. I mean, they're just 2 different spirits entirely. So that's the first thing to do, is just kind of separate yourself from the bourbon. It's not bourbon. Bourbon's going to be your go-to forever. This is just going to be a different experience. And so on to Oban 12. Have you ever had Oban before? Have you ever heard of Oban?
Never even heard of it.
All right, so Oban is obviously a Scotch whiskey. It's a distillery in one of the 5 regions of Scotland. This one's in the Highlands. That's one of 5. There's the Highlands, Lowlands, Campbelltown, Islay, and Speyside. So not that you really care about this information, but matured entirely in ex-bourbon casks. Very light in color, as you can tell. And aged for 12 years. And of course, in Scotland, you're so much further north that it just takes longer for things to mature up there. So a 12-year Scotch is probably equivalent to like a 6-7 year bourbon.
So, I mean, even at 6 or 7 years, how does it maintain this light, watered down apple juice complexion.
So the reason why so many Scotch whiskeys are very pale in color is because, unlike bourbon, Scotch whiskeys can use refilled casks. So the casks that was used for this, they already extracted all the color for the bourbon that it was aged in prior to this. So then you still put in the malted barley, and it gets this, the color's already been extracted from the previous spirit, so it just gets a little bit of the hue from that Scotch, or from that oak barrel.
So what would be if for the most part all the wood, the flavor has been extracted out, what would be the point of using ex bourbon?
So ex-bourbon, because it's still going to have a lot of the flavor that comes from the oak. So you're still going to get some of the oakiness, but then you'll also get some of that, those bourbon characteristics, vanillas and some caramels, but it's much more subtle than a bourbon. It's not going to punch you in the face with the sweetness and the honeys and the oaks and all that stuff. It's going to be much more nuanced and relaxed, and it's going to be a little more cereal, and it's definitely a much more, you kind of let it roll around your mouth a little bit and contemplative in that sense. I always have I'm sure you don't water down your whiskeys that often, but I always have a water dropper in case I want to dilute it a little bit and kind of bring out some more of those flavors.
It's actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that it's actually kind of crazy because the nose, it almost flips back and forth. Like you can kind of, at some point you can kind of smell like a kind of bourbony sort of nose. And then another point, you're like, oh, this is definitely Scotch. It's like that.
Yeah. And this one's bottled at, here's the bottle, just in case you're interested.
Okay.
Bottled at 56.2%. So again, it's a cask strength Scotch whiskey. And the reason why I picked this one is because I wanted something with a little bit more of a neutral flavor profile to start off the flight. Each additional one will have some sort of cask characteristic that was unique to it, and this is kind of like a baseline Scotch whiskey. Ex-bourbon or hogshead are the most common type of barrels that Scotch is matured in. So this is the standard, like the baseline, and then each one will kind of build on that.
Got it. Ricky says all good things about Scotch come from the bourbon barrel.
Well, a lot of Scotch drinkers would say that the purpose of bourbon is to prepare the barrels for Scotch whiskey. So that's kind of what us Scotch drinkers say.
That's funny. All right, are we going in?
All right, yeah, let's go in for the palate.
I get a lot of sweetness, like that front initial palate.
Yeah.
It kind of throws you for a loop, actually.
Yeah, a little bit. This one is a lot more. It's a lot richer than the color would indicate, and it's not bold in the sense of like a bourbon. It's not like super sweet and in your face, but it's kind of more of a cereal sweetness that kind of integrates well with that oak.
This might sound crazy, so forgive me.
No.
But like a frosted flake.
Okay, that's good. That's perfect. I think that's a great description of this. It does remind me of a frosted flake.
Yeah, just a little bit. It is. It's I don't know if this is. I mean, I'm assuming that there's no rye in here.
No, it's 100% malted barley.
Okay, yeah, because I get what I would consider usually spiciness, but maybe that's just the proof coming out. Like,
yeah, the spiciness is likely coming from the proof. So all the whiskeys we're having now are all made from from barley. If it's a single malt Scotch, that means it comes from a single distillery and it's made with 100% malted barley. So that's what this is. It's a single malt Scotch. And we'll touch on what the Irish whiskey is when we get to that one next.
Yeah, there's something in that middle palate, somewhere in that middle palate, like the real like Scotchiness comes out, like that barley kind of sticks out a lot. Yeah. But then it kind of gets drowned out still by that sweetness and the proof. Like even now, it actually still lingers.
And are you enjoying it? Do you like it?
I don't hate it actually. I mean,
all right.
This is actually like I was trying to think of when I would like this. This would be good with a nice cookie.
Yeah, that's actually, because it does have like that frosting flavor profile to it. So you get kind of a cookie that's not terribly sweet, and you sip along with this. That will add that nice like frosting sweetness to like a more subdued cookie.
Yeah, it's a D spitting out tasting notes. I'm not a tasting note person, but the frosted flake definitely came out to me.
Yeah,
I don't hate that. I love the proof. What 56? That's what 112.
Yeah, 112. Right? Yep.
Yeah, it's smooth. Like the heat lingers a little bit, Actually, a lot of it, but I'm okay with it. I love it. Like,
Yeah,
I love tasting the proof. I love like anytime I pick a barrel or any kind of bourbon that I like. I'm always I want it to linger for as long. I want to be able to be talking to somebody like and 3 minutes later being like, oh man, like it's still on my tongue. So
yeah, yeah.
that's what she said. But yeah,
Well played. Well played.
yeah. No, I don't hate this. This is actually pretty good.
And I know I'm willing to bet. I don't know how much of the sample you have left, but if you revisit this in the future, perfect. So when you revisit it, just sit back with it, let it roll around your mouth a little bit, and I think the more you taste it, the more you're going to end up enjoying it and kind of tasting things that you didn't expect to. Like sometimes you'll get some peaches and tropical fruits, and it's just kind of nuanced. You can add a couple of drops of water, see if something comes out from that, and just kind of play around with it. And I'm sure that's similar with bourbon. I mean, you can play around with a little bit of difference of water to get some of those different characteristics, be it cherries or vanillas and all that kind of stuff that goes into a bourbon. But same thing with the Scotch. It's just something that kind of takes practice, basically.
Yeah, no, that's actually that's actually pretty good. The more that I sit with it,
Oh yeah.
it's probably something that I would actually keep at my bar just for like I have a few friends that are into Scotch,
Yeah.
but also just like that's something that I would like have a bourbon drinker like hey like just taste this out. I know like I don't like Scotch usually, but this is actually kind of decent.
Yeah, no, and I feel like this would be good for like as like a warm up dram for even a flight of bourbons. Like this would play because you wouldn't want to have a 120 proof bourbon right before this because that would kind of overshadow a lot of the nuances of this. This would be a good starting dram to your lineup, just something a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more subtle before you jump into some of those higher proof bourbons.
Yeah, all right, man. You're 1 for 1 right now.
All right.
You're already doing better than most.
All right, let's go to the Redbreast 12-year-old.
Okay. Let me get good breast.
All right, so this one, as you mentioned, you've already got experience with. And this is a single pot still Irish whiskey. And the difference between a single malt Scotch whiskey and a single pot still Irish whiskey is that single pot still means you can use both malted and unmalted barley. So you'll get some more of those like grassy and green notes in the whiskey than you will on a single malt.
Okay.
This one is double matured in both ex-bourbon casks and ex-sherry casks. So casks that once held sherry were filled and matured this Irish whiskey. And then the final difference is that this one is triple distilled as opposed to double distilled. So each additional distillation, some more congeners get filtered out of it basically, and it has a lighter, smoother distillate profile.
The nose on this is amazing.
Yeah, the nose is ridiculously good on this. Yeah. This is an all-time favorite whiskey of mine. I absolutely love this one, and at the time I bought this one, I got it from California, shipped for about like $65-ish, $70 a bottle, which is an absolute steal. The price has gone up a little bit more since then; it's around $80 now, but it's still well worth it in my opinion. This one is just such a phenomenal whiskey. Yeah, the nose is nice, and you can kind of smell those green notes that you get from that
unmalted barley on the nose.
Yeah, and this is actually different so maybe that's another reason that I've leaned more towards the Irish whiskey than like the Scotch is because like Scotch, a lot of times, at least the few that I've tried, they have been more of like a floral, fruity noses, right? Whereas the Irish whiskey has been like more earth tones and like deeper. So like, and that, I mean, that plays a part because the Scotch, I'll smell these things and then I go taste it. I'm like, this is not what I smelled at all. Almost like the Irish whiskey is like kind of lined up with the nose.
Yeah, and trust me, we're going to get to some scotches that are going to be a little bit more in line with that earthiness that you just described. So that's the beautiful thing about Scotch is that the gamut of flavor profiles, just because you can do so many different things with it that you're not allowed to do in bourbon. Like you can use different casks, you can peat the barley, you can do you can just combine so many different things to make a unique, interesting flavor profile. That when we get to these last three after the Irish whiskey, you'll see how diverse it can be. But let's focus on the Irish whiskey so far. And you ready for the sip? Ready to go in there? Yeah, this nose is phenomenal though. You could just sit here and smell this one for hours.
Yeah, I mean, like this is something where like if this was in a blind, I would swear this is bourbon.
Yeah, Yeah, and that's yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought too. I think Irish whiskey is much more closely related to a bourbon, and this one, yeah, it definitely has a lot of those bourbon characteristics to it.
Yeah, yeah. This is one where it's like I don't get a bunch of like different notes,
Yeah.
but it's just like a very good, solid, like a good like sipper. It's a smooth. I get like a little bit like a almost like a maybe even like a vanilla on the front,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like so earthy on the back.
Yeah, yeah, I get a lot of that grassy, like almost like hay-like finish on the palate,
Yeah.
and I get some apples and some orchard fruits in there too. This one is just such a nice whiskey. And I'm telling you, the more you drink this stuff, the more you'll start getting out of it because you're used to those really rich, sweet bourbon flavor profiles. That once you kind of dip your toes in some of these other spirits, it's like, all right, let's take a step back and kind of really analyze and start tasting this stuff. Which I mean, you need a full bottle probably of one of these to kind of go through that entire experience. But that's the cool thing about it. That's the cool thing about all whiskeys is that it evolves throughout the bottle. Your palate builds out throughout the bottle, and it just turns into such a cool journey.
Wait, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
You said you got apples and orchard fruits. Is that two different things?
No, I was just being redundant in my description. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Damn, you were teaching me a lot today.
No. But I do hear people describe it as both ways, so I always wonder, are there different fruits in an orchard that I'm not as familiar with? But, yeah.
I mean, orchard fruit sounds more sophisticated. Like,
It does.
like,
It does. That's more of like a pretentious Scotch drinker's term than
Fred Minnick definitely says orchard fruits.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, that's really good. It's like this is a good whiskey that's like to me doesn't interrupt your palate at all. Like it's not like even with like I don't usually like sherry cask finish anything, but I guess since it's like it's not just a sherry cask, it kind of counteracts like a little bit. And it's like it comes like earthy, but it's one that is like I can pretty much drink anything after this without like my complete palate like being ruined. Or some stuff like you finish in sherry or like a port finish or different things like that, or even sometimes like just like a really strong rye. You drink it and like your palate's kind of screwed for the rest of the night. This right here, you can drink that. It doesn't matter before or after a pour, and like, it's not going to mess anything up. It's just a good pour.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I picked this order on purpose because I knew each additional one we have are going to be a little bit more rich, so I didn't want to distort your palate for the lighter spirits that we're having tonight. And for anybody who's interested, here's the bottle of the Redbreast 12 cask strength. Definitely, and that's the thing that's a bummer about living in Virginia is that it's a struggle to get stuff like this. Whereas up here you can see the Redbreast cask strength on shelves in half a dozen liquor stores just around the corner. But I don't think I've ever seen it in an ABC store, and at none of these that I gave you tonight, I haven't seen it in an ABC store in Virginia.
So you have family here, or?
Yeah, my brother and sister live in Midlothian, so I go down about once a quarter. I'll be down there again in August.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You ready for number 3?
Let's go.
Somebody's asking what my favorite Redbreast is outside the 21 and the 27. So the 21, obviously, and the 27 are too prestigious, like super high-end Redbreasts. I have the 21 behind me. I have a bottle of the 27, but I'm saving that for a special occasion, so I haven't tried it yet. But my favorite, aside from the cask strength, is probably it's called the Redbreast Listowel. It's a more affordable version. It's bottled at 46%, so it's a little bit lighter on the palate, but it's just matured in sherry casks, which I know you just shot down. But that one is sherry cask done right. It's just very well integrated in the Redbreast distillate. So that would be my suggestion for anybody who's listening who wants to get a more affordable Redbreast.
Well, I will say for like the the Scotch and Irish, I mean, from at least from what I've had so far, the difference between when the Scotches are finished in like these sherry casks or any kind of cask compared to like bourbon, a lot of times like bourbon, I guess really whiskey when it's finished in these things, it overpowers like the actual drink, right? Like a lot of times you can tell that someone has like a young bourbon. They're like, all right, this has a little bit of few kings. Let's try to finish this or toast it so that we can kind of round it out a little bit more. Whereas on the Irish whiskey or the Scotch side, this is just an addition. So it's not going to over, like for the most part, what I've had so far, it doesn't overpower it. It just adds another layer.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Like, I actually have never had a bourbon finished in anything because I always thought that was strange. I was like, well, bourbon already is what it is. Why do I need it finished in anything? It already has its signature profile, and it'd probably just become crowded with an additional finish. Whereas malted barley, that's a much more laid back base and a much more laid back grain, so it's not as sweet as a corn base whiskey. So it can take on some additional layers and depths from these reused casks that bourbons may not be as kind to. At least that's my perspective. I'm not a huge bourbon drinker, like I said, but that would be my guess. So the number.
Should we do this in reverse on my line?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do a more interesting bourbon lineup. I mean, I'll tell you what I have. I've got the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, which is my go-to bourbon. I've got a store Knob Creek 11 cask strength. I've got some barrel bourbons. Larceny Barrel Proof is another one that I have that's pretty easy to get up here. The Elijah Craig 18, which I haven't opened yet. I've heard some questionable things about that one. And what else do I have on my bourbon shelf? That basically rounds it out. Those are the not a huge shelf, but I'm definitely curious to try some of these other more interesting bourbons without a doubt.
Some Booker's back there.
Oh yeah, of course I've got Booker's. Yeah, I do like Booker's a lot. That's that's a nice one.
Okay, we'll have to do something. I can put together a care package for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm definitely down for a in reverse, and we can always exchange things in person on one of my few trips down to Richmond at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so number 3 on the list is going to be the Deanston 2008 Bordeaux red wine matured cask. So, and I picked this one because I wanted to introduce kind of a unique cask maturation for a Scotch whiskey just to show its diversity. So this one obviously was matured in casks that previously held Bordeaux wine, red wine, and it wasn't just finished in it. It was matured entirely in the Bordeaux cask. It's 9 years old, so it's a young whiskey. It's very bright. It's very rich. It's very spicy. Yeah, it's a beautiful color. You can get that. You can see that red hue. Basically, it's a kind of an amber reddish.
It almost smells like wine with some barley just in it.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I get a little bit of sourness to it. Maybe some like raspberry notes to it.
I don't know if it makes sense, but it smells red.
Yeah, it does. No, that's a lot of people will say, oh, it smells or tastes like red fruits, and it's like, okay, this doesn't really narrow it down too much, but I guess that makes sense. Yeah. But no, it does.
This is 116 proof.
Yeah.
And you get no like ethanol on here like at all.
Yeah.
It's pretty smooth nose.
This one is like a revered Scotch whiskey that whiskey enthusiasts love. It was obviously discontinued. It's a vintage, so if it has a year on it instead of an age statement, that means all the whiskey was distilled in that year. So this is the 2008. So these have long since disappeared from the shelf, but it's one that people just absolutely loved when it had its time to shine.
Oh, there's a little bit of ethanol there, but I get real close to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it sounds like it's a theme with the Scotch whiskeys is that the nose isn't as powerful as some of this other stuff that you're used to smelling.
I will say that just from the nose, this smells like the one I'm not gonna like.
Okay, all right. So you may not like this flavor profile.
It just smells that way. So, but I could be wrong.
All right, let's go on the palate.
It's interesting. It's interesting, right? It's almost got like a sour fruitiness to it.
Yeah, I don't know if I like it or hate it.
All right. Yeah.
It's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like almost like a sweet cooking wine almost. Like.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can get that.
Lingers a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Dry finish, very dry finish, but That's probably because of the wine maturation in there, I would assume. Um, yeah, that one's not for me.
All right.
That one, that
No Deanston 2008 for you.
yeah, no, that one's not for me. The more I sip it, it's like maybe you said like sourness, something like tartness, like it's like
yeah.
it's definitely there, and it's definitely dries the hell out of my tongue out. But some powerful flavors on there though.
Yeah, it's very rich, without a doubt. And some people suggest letting it kind of sit there for like 15, 20 minutes, let it cool down a little bit, even adding a couple of drops of water. You can kind of mellow out some of that sourness. So you can try that. You can set it aside, and maybe if you revisit it later, it'll be transformational. It'll be like, wow, I didn't expect this to happen.
Hold on, I poured a little bit of water in here, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, see if that makes any difference, see if you like that any better. Now, is it as you try out new bourbons, do you ever have a first pour or two of a bourbon and you're like, I don't really like this? You come back to it a few months later, you try it again, it's like, wow, this is fantastic stuff. Does that ever happen?
With
all Heaven Hill products.
Oh, all right. Interesting.
All Heaven Hill products. Not all, but most of them.
Yeah.
Like my initial pour, like sometimes I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
Like my first one that I hated was it was like just a regular Logic Craig barrel pick, like a 94 proof.
Yeah.
I opened it, hated it. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to finish this. Came back 2 months later, I drank it all in like a week. Like it's just like, and like a lot of the Logic Craig barrel proofs, the Henry McKenna's, Larcenies, like a lot of those, off of the initial one. I just usually don't like it. So I don't know, something about the neck pour or what, but yeah, it happens that way sometimes.
Yeah. So we'll just, if you don't like this, we'll just say it's because it's your first pour. If you revisited it in 2 months, it would be an all-time favorite of yours. We'll just go. Yeah, exactly. We'll go with that narrative. All right. Well, we're 2 for 3 for the night. You know, like it's not terrible, not too terrible. I'm a little bit hesitant about these last couple because we're gonna introduce peat to the whiskey. So, have you ever had a peated Scotch whiskey before?
Yes, I have. That's the worst feature.
Oh, so you don't like it? All right. So you may. All right. So you may not like these last couple of pours. The first one is gently peated, and then the last one is heavily peated. But you never know. Maybe it's sat in your memory bank and it triggered something, and you'll all of a sudden like it. We'll find out. So the Kilkerran is the more lightly peated one.
And here's the bottle.
Ardbeg.
Yes.
What the hell is that?
We'll get to Ardbeg last. This one. No worries. This is the Kilkerran 8-year-old, and this was another one that people just went crazy over. This one sold out in basically minutes when it was released. It's matured fully in Re-charred Oloroso sherry casks, so it's going to have that sherry maturation, which you don't like. It's going to be lightly peated, which you don't like, but maybe those two will cancel each other out, and you're going to love it. We'll find out.
What else I don't like?
What?
Oloroso.
Oh, all right. So we're at like a triple negative here, but we're gonna see if somehow all of these flavors added together turns into something beautiful. Let's find out.
That peat takes over so much.
And this is a lightly peated one. Just wait until we get to the next one.
But it's almost like I almost want like cinnamon peat.
I get a little bit of like
sugar.
Yeah, I get some of that sweetness. I get a little bit of like almost like a barbecue-y kind of nose too. So what do you think? No?
No.
Not for you? Not for you?
That ain't it.
All right. So what are you getting from it?
It's interesting because it's like initially, it's like, hold on.
Yeah, it's got so much going on to it. I mean, you get some of that sweetness, you get some of that barbecue, some of that smoke, all at once. Some of that sherried influence, but it's not for everyone. This one is a bit of an acquired taste.
It's how sometimes you stub your toe and it doesn't hurt initially, but then like 5 seconds later, you're like, holy hell. That's what I feel about the palate on this. It's like the front palate, you're like, oh, sweetness. You get a little bit of the proof on there.
Yep.
and then like all of a sudden, like the smoky peat just kind of hits you in the face. Like it's just there, and it lingers. Like it's still here now.
Yeah.
And like yeah,
Not your cup of tea.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no worries.
It's real funky, real funky.
The Ardbeg Corryvreckan. So Ardbeg comes from a distillery on Islay, another one of the 5 regions in Scotland. And Islay is known primarily for their peated whiskey, and this is more of a traditional peat. And you'll be able to know what I mean by the nose. It's gonna kind of blow you back with its just its initial nose.
I smelled it when it was on my table, and I was like, that can't be what I just opened. And then I put my nose to it.
Yeah, so this one, Ardbeg has kind of more of an ashy-ish peat profile. You definitely get smoke. You get a lot of those barbecues. You know, it's...
Look at that apple juice.
Yeah, it looks like apple juice, exactly. And this one won't be as complex or interesting as the Kilkerran, but you'll get that traditional peatiness. Lots of smoke, lots of smoked ham, people will say, bacon, that kind of stuff.
Smoked ham, that's very specific.
Yeah. Yeah, see? Just pretend like this is ham juice, you know? That's what this is.
Ham juice.
Yes.
That should be their tagline. Okay.
Yeah, so for me, it's a sweeter on the palate. I definitely get that smokiness. To me, it's a little bit ashier than it is like bonfire smoke. And then I get some underlying sweetness, kind of like a baked apple, or you know, some one of those lighter fruits.
I get it's funny you say baked apple. I was thinking Granny's apple, like something like that.
Yeah,
like real sweet. But I also get.
What else do you get in it?
Man, that is. You said ash. That's ashy. That's definitely that. But I also get it's like maybe like a coffee bean. Like it's like something like tastes like some kind of like Java coffee-esque like flavor, and that could just be like the smokiness, but that like
almost like a little bitterness to it.
Yeah.
No, I get that too.
Yeah, we're 3 for 5. So.
All right. So you don't really like this one. It's not your.
No, it's honestly it's like it's a smokiness, like the smokiness, like anything that I've had with peat. I always have liked the front palate, and that peat kicks in, and it just kind of drowns it out for me, and I can't get with it. You know, it's like it's just different. You know, it's not something that I drink regularly. It's not something that's in literally anything that I drink. So it's just something that it gives you a complete different profile than like I ever have on an everyday basis. So.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And, you know, sometimes peat grows on people, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it's a completely different drinking experience, obviously, than a bourbon. You know, and it's just it's something that you have to get used to. And, you know, a lot of people describe peated whiskey as kind of like a winter's whiskey, you know, by a fire when it's snowing outside, something that'll just kind of warm you up. That's a common description. But yeah, I mean, especially if it's not something that you kind of exposed yourself to in the past, it can be a little bit abrasive at first, you know. And it's crazy. I do a lot of whiskey tastings with beginner whiskey drinkers, and about half of them absolutely hate peat, and half of them think the peated pour was the best of the night. They absolutely love it. They can connect with it, and it's just something incredible. So it is a very divisive style of whiskey.
I move on in my bourbons, whiskey life. You know, I'm always open to try different things, and so it's good to know that there's a few Scotches and Irish whiskeys that I don't hate.
Yeah.
Really, so.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's kind of what I wanted to show. And this is just kind of a drop in the bucket compared to all the different flavor profiles you can get in a Scotch. Like, the cool thing is as we drank through this, no two drams tasted even similar to each other. They were all dramatically different, which is what Scotch drinkers kind of love about Scotch whiskey, is just the tremendous gamut of flavors you can kind of dive into and experience. And maybe you can get a similar experience in bourbon. I haven't explored it really enough, or in my experience, the Elijah Craig barrel proof has a ton of similarities to like the barrel bourbon stuff, to the Larceny barrel proof, to the Booker's. There's nuances and differences between them, but in general, that strong sweet corn flavor and the heavy oak is just kind of a dominant flavor for me. That I don't really get a ton of differences between the different bourbons. Though I do enjoy bourbon a lot. I am a fan of it. I'm not one of those Scotch drinking bourbon haters.
Yeah, and I think that with bourbon, it's one of those things to where like so many people use like the same mash bills, right? So it's like you're not going to get like an overwhelming like crazy like dimension within pours, but like different distilleries and like where they're aged at, stuff like that. I mean, then you also have like high rye bourbons, like that's where a lot of it like differentiates for me is like you go to like high rye was like 21% or 32% rye. That makes a crazy difference, right?
Oh,
that's where a lot of progression comes from. And I've always said that when it comes to bourbon, I prefer somewhere between 6 to 8 years because I feel like there's so much more variation. Whereas like to me, after 10 years, it's like everything is so oaky. There's only so much that you can do. Like always make the what's the word I'm looking for? The comparison, right? You have like Buffalo Trace store picks, and you have Eagle Rare store picks. I always tell people I prefer Buffalo Trace store picks because they're all like 5 to 7 years old. Yeah. So you get like a crazy variation between different like picks, whereas Eagle Rare, they're all 10-year picks. They're all 10 years, and they always seem to like, to me, like I haven't experienced a lot of variation in the different picks as opposed to this Buffalo Trace where like you could have a 5-year, 6, 7, 8 year, and like it's just different. So yeah, it's just once you get to those older ages, a lot of times it's just everything gets drowned out by that oak.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I've heard that before too. That the sweet spot is in that 6 to 8 year range. And I don't have a ton of experience outside of that. I do love the Elijah Craig barrel proof. That's obviously 12 years old, and maybe it's just that oakiness that I like. I don't know. I can't really explain why, but I can definitely understand that. I never, for me, bourbon has to be barrel proof. I have never liked a bourbon that was below like 50% ABV. And the higher the proof, just the more it offers. So anytime I tell a Scotch drinker to kind of dabble in bourbon, because I'm a firm believer that all whiskey enthusiasts should just explore all different types of spirits, be it bourbons or Irish whiskeys, Japanese whiskeys, rums. Just keep on building out your palate and be curiously minded, and your palate will just build, and you'll be able to connect with so many more spirits. But yeah, my bourbon journey is still going on. I still enjoy the stuff that I have, so it's something that's kind of a work in progress.
Yeah, man. The good thing about did you start with Scotch?
I started with Scotch, yeah.
Yeah. So the good thing about people that start with Scotch and go to bourbon, at least from my experience, and also like wine to Scotch to bourbon, is their palates are always like a lot better than someone like me who just drinks bourbon because you guys experience. I mean, look at all the finishes that we just had, like just in 5 pours, right? Y'all have so like it ranges a lot more than bourbon, and so like especially like women usually have like a really good palate. They drink wine and all that stuff, and so they get into the bourbon world, and they start flinging out tasting notes. You're like, damn, I didn't even. They'll fling out like 8 to 10. It's like I have vanilla and caramel, So it's like, So it's like that's one good thing about coming over from Scotch to bourbon is that you a lot of times you can tell because people give like really good tasting notes because they're just so used to just like because you guys. I say you guys like you're a distiller, but like Scotch and like there's no whole bar. There's no real. I mean, there are rules. There's not any crazy rules. With bourbon, it has to be a fresh oak barrel. It has to do this and this. With whiskey and Scotch, you're like, hey, get a rum barrel. Screw it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah,
age it for 25 years. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, and I've noticed that too. That it's a lot easier for me to get Scotch drinkers to enjoy bourbon than it is for me to get bourbon drinkers into Scotch, because Scotch is just so much more reserved and subtle and nuanced that people who are used to that sweetness and that those vanillas and caramels right off the bat, and or that fennel that comes from the rye, then that's what they're kind of looking for. And when they have it like that Oban 12, I'm actually happy that you like that one, because I felt like, all right, this one might be a little too laid back for you to like, but that ended up being one of the pours you enjoyed more tonight. So I'm glad to hear that. So
That might be my favorite pour of the night, honestly.
yeah, no, that one's really ridiculously good, and I'm glad I know that. I'm more familiar with your palate preferences now, so if we do a Scotch tasting 2.0, I can kind of skew towards some of my ex-bourbon ones. Like one of my all-time favorite whiskeys, period, comes from a distillery that you've never heard of. It's called Del Ewan. Most people have never heard of it, and it's mostly used for blended whiskeys, like Johnny Walker. But when an independent bottler gets a single barrel from them and they can age it well, it is just incredibly fruity and creamy and waxy, and like the one that I have here has got lots of pineapples and tropical fruits. It's just an incredible pour. So next time I send you some whiskey, or I hand them off to you next time I'm in Virginia, I'll include a sample of that, because I think that one would be one that you'd really connect with, that might push you further into like adding a bottle or two of Scotch whiskey.
I don't know. I mean, you're the third or fourth person that's trying to push me to Scotch. So, hey, by the end of this year, I might have one or two Scotch bottles or Irish whiskey bottles sitting on my shelf.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I hope that my lineup here, aside from those last couple of pours, kind of pushed you in a little bit closer to maybe adding one into your
collection.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially cask strength. I'll try anything cask strength. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth a shot. All right, before I get you out of here tonight, because I know it's getting late. I've got a couple of fun questions for you. Just some whiskey related, some just random. What was you've already mentioned this a little bit before, but what would you say like the very first bourbon bottle that really like said, all right, I want to jump into this more? Was it that Blanton's, or was it something else that really connected with you?
Blandon's got me into like kind of chasing, like kind of hunting around, but that was kind of more me being a contrarian and seeing like, what is the hype about?
Yeah.
E.H. Taylor is one that I hunted for a small batch for a long time, because we weren't dropping small batches around here at the time.
Yeah.
So I hunted for it. I found it in New York. I found 2 bottles for $60 each. I had a friend go get it. And that was the bottle that I opened up, and I said to myself that, like, I need to find every variation of this bottle. I love this so much. And also, it stood the test of time. Like, even now that I'm even more into bourbon and I've tried so many other pours, I still go back to E.H. Taylor. I'm like, yeah, this. Even now, like, I love cask strength stuff. But E.H. Taylor's only 100 proof, and I still love it. So I'd say E.H. Taylor.
Yeah, and isn't that such a wonderful thing too, when you have that kind of epiphany, that moment where you're like, oh wow, this is something special that I've got right here, and then it just kind of drives your passion into the whole thing. That's such a cool time and experience to have.
Yeah, definitely.
How many bottles do you have in your collection?
I'd say probably approximately 250 to 300.
All right.
That's almost exactly the range of where my collection's at too. So you're in good company here. If you're not drinking whiskey neat, what's your next choice of alcohol?
Tequila shot.
Tequila. All right.
Yeah.
Just shots though. You're not there sipping it.
I'll sip tequila if it's like good tequila. But usually if I'm drinking tequila, usually it's because the place that I'm at does not have good whiskey.
Yeah. No, that's
So I'm
fair.
like, screw it, give me bottom shelf tequila. I do have also some tequila that's of course finished in bourbon barrels too, like William LaRue, Blaine and stuff like that. But like, yeah, tequila is like a mezcal. I'll sip on the mezcal also. Yeah. So tequila's the second one.
Which is interesting because mezcal kind of has that smokiness to it too, right? That has like a bit of a smoky profile.
A little bit, yeah. But usually by the time that I'm on mezcal, I'm already drunk. I need something to sip on.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. And mezcal and tequila for me is something I still want to kind of delve into a little bit. I don't have much mezcal or tequila in my collection, but that's a spirit that curious that I'm interested in.
Yeah,
You
I
ever
don't
try?
know anything. I don't know anything about it. I just like if it's there, I'm drunk. I'm like, you know what? Let's give me a mezcal. So like,
Yeah. Have you ever dabbled in any cask strength rums?
yes and no. I really haven't done very much. I have a couple people that have told me to try rums, but I did go to Nashville Barrel Company a couple of weeks ago, and they do rums.
Yeah.
And I recently got 145 proof rum from them
That's
that
awesome.
tastes like bourbon and does not drink like hazmat at all. Like it is
Yeah.
delicious. So
All right.
I'm going to the Dominican Republic in a couple of weeks. I was like, I'm taking this. I'm gonna be
Oh,
drinking
yeah.
hell in the DR.
No, absolutely. That rum is the Caribbean drink without a doubt, and rum is definitely a spirit that's worth exploring too, and especially for a bourbon drinker because it is a little bit more on the sweet side flavor profile. So it might connect with you, but yeah, I do have a few cask strength rums that are just exceptional that I either use as my dessert palate or bourbon. So it is great, another great one to explore. All right, non whiskey related questions. What is your favorite action film?
My favorite action film. I guess that depends on what you consider action. Do you consider The Other Guys action?
It's a comedy action, I guess you could say, arguably.
Yeah, The Other Guys is my favorite all-time movie. It's just so stupid that it's enjoyable. And I mean, I love Marvel films, so
Yeah.
I can almost never go wrong with those. A couple of them the past couple of years have been kind of
Yeah.
but I do love Marvel films.
Do you have a favorite Marvel film? Like, what's the best Marvel film?
Um, you know, I can't say at the top of my head, but I've always loved the Iron Man series.
Yeah.
Just I love his personality, but the end game, that's just like it's just a classic. So
Yeah, it really is. The way they were able to wrap up so many different storylines. It is just, my wife got me into the Marvel films, and I was because from an outsider, like, it's just the same action movie over and over again. But then you actually watch them and the complex, intricate storylines that each movie has, and then how they all connect together. It's brilliant, brilliant.
Storytelling.
it's really insane because like when Endgame ended, I realized like my birthday is May 4th.
Yeah.
There's always a Marvel movie that comes out on my birthday weekend. So I've been watching Marvel. Like I think the first one I saw was I think it was Iron Man on my 16th birthday.
Yeah.
And like you kind of realize, damn, I've been watching this for like 14 or 15 years. Everything's coming together. And like every now and then, like an old Marvel movie would come on TV. And like what was I watching? I was watching one of the Avengers movies, and I realized the guy that was in the Avengers movies is in the Black Panther movie, and it's like they just have these little sprinkles, sprinkles of people, sprinkles of information that like they don't even touch on. They're just like in Black Panther, like the sister was like, "Oh, we got to take care of another white guy." And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Then Bucky appears at the end of the movie. You're like, what the hell? It's like...
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you talking about? But then it's like just like a foreshadow to what's to come. It is really incredible how they.
It's genius.
Yeah, and it makes the rewatch value that much more because like, what did I miss the last time? What are these little tidbits that I can pick up? But I do agree with you that the recent phase has just been okay. It's going to be hard to recapture those first few phases. It really
Black
is.
Widow was a no for me. The new Doctor Strange to me wasn't really a Doctor Strange movie. It was more like a Spider-Man movie.
All right.
There's a few Shang-Chi that was funny, but I didn't like some of the things. Like he hated his dad because his dad was depressed and was trying to get his wife back. And I'm like, so you're gonna kill your dad because he's possessed? Like, there's a few of them that like, but I see what they're trying to do. You got to revive it. So we'll see if this new Thor comes out.
Yeah, no, I've got a lot of high hope for Thor. I love Thor Ragnarok. That's maybe my favorite non-Marvel, Avengers Marvel film. And I'm hoping that Love and Thunder, which is probably going to be Thor's last film, will stand up. And Taika Waititi is coming back to direct it, and he's a brilliant director. So I've got very, very high hopes for that one. So fingers crossed with that one. Yeah, fingers crossed for that one for sure.
What is the best appetizer at a restaurant?
Best appetizer at a restaurant, man. Oh, man. I mean, I am a sucker for mozzarella sticks.
All
Love
right.
me some mod sticks. Spinach artichoke dip is when I'm with the family because we can always agree on that.
Yeah.
Um, and wings.
Oh yeah, wings are
Yeah,
classic. It's hard to
yeah.
go wrong with any of those. But those are three fantastic choices. Somebody's mentioning loaded tots as their favorite option.
See, but loaded tots isn't. I was trying to pick things that are like almost on every appetizer menu.
Yeah,
Loaded
yeah.
tots, at least in Virginia, they're not everywhere. So,
Mhm.
but mozzarella stick, you can just. I mean, you can't go wrong with just fried cheese, right?
Whatnot. What do you do for a living?
I'm in outside sales, so
Mhm.
I have a very flexible life.
Mhm.
So it's fun. It provides me with some time to do my bourbon stuff, and it's a little crazy right now with like the whole COVID things like that. I sell disposables, and so like that whole industry is kind of crazy. Prices are crazy, but it's
Mhm.
fun. It's fun.
Do you get to travel a lot in this job?
So my territory is pretty much almost all of Virginia
Okay.
and the Outer Banks, except for from you're familiar with Virginia, so from Fredericksburg down, that's all my territory.
Okay.
I usually stick around. I just recently, so it used to be this Richmond 804 to 757 in the Outer Banks. I recently just got like the rest of Virginia, but I kind of stick around Richmond and Virginia Beach. Outer Banks only a couple times a year because they have like they're seasonal, but like I don't travel like anywhere besides that for work unless
Yeah.
it's like a sales meeting.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's great. And if it allows you flexibility and career work life balance, that's what more could you ask for?
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of Fredericksburg, why is there always traffic there? Every time I go down to Virginia, it's just like you're cruising along, going at like 75, 80, and then all of a sudden you hit Fredericksburg, and it's just a standstill. I don't get it.
It doesn't make any
I don't
sense.
get it either. There's not even anything there. I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's like every time like from here to DC, it's supposed to be an hour and a half, and usually it's like hour 45, hour 57. You look, there's always a red line in front of
Yeah.
Fredericksburg. You always know.
Every single time, to the point where when on Monday morning my wife and I drove back from Richmond, we left at 5 in the morning just to avoid that little red line. So we avoided all the Fredericksburg traffic and the DC traffic all the way up just north of New York City. But that's what it takes. You have to leave that
That early in the morning.
That's what I do. So like I'll either leave out early in the morning, or I just like I got some point. I have a lot of friends in DC,
Yeah.
and it's like at the point like, screw it. I'm just gonna have my own day in Richmond, and then whenever I feel like getting on the road, I do. But when I'm in Nova and I have to drive back home, like I wake up early, like around 5 o'clock. I don't say bye to anybody. I'm
Yeah.
gone. Like I'm home by the time people wake up. I'm not
Yeah.
dealing with this shit.
Yeah, no, exactly. Why deal with that traffic?
Yeah.
All right, I'll get you here on this. I'll get you out of here on this last question. If you're gonna share a dram of whiskey with 4 famous people, dead or alive, which 4 people are you picking?
4 famous people, dead or alive. J. Cole, Jay Z off the top. Wow, that's a really good one. I'd say Fred Hampton, Black Panthers, and Obama.
All right, that. It sounds like a wonderful table that would have a very engaging conversation. And what better way to drink, or what better way to have a conversation than over some nice whiskey, right?
Exactly. The best way.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna let you get going on the rest of your evening tonight. I want to thank you again for joining me. This was a lot of fun for me. I love introducing new whiskeys to especially whiskey-minded people like you. And I hope we can do this again, but in reverse. I'd love to try some bourbons out there.
Yeah, man. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for giving me at least 3 whiskeys that I actually enjoyed. The other 2, maybe in 2 months or 30 years, I will really love them.
Yeah.
When you do revisit them, send me a DM. Let me know what you think of them on a second tasting, and I'll definitely send you some more Scotch samples in the future too, just so you can kind of dabble a little bit more, so I can kind of push you in the direction of buying your very first Scotch
bottle.
Yeah, cool. And we'll talk soon, and we'll get you on brown water bench. We'll do this in reverse.
All right, that sounds great. I hope you have a good night, and I will be in touch soon.
Yeah, you too, man. You have a good night.
You too. Good night.
All right.